guys, Brian here with Mustang Steve. Today we're going to talk about what I call our test mule. This is a 1968 Mustang coupe. It came with the 289 C4 from the factory, four-wheel drum, manual brakes, manual steering. I actually bought it several months before I bought Mustang Steve. I knew I wanted a Mustang whether I ended up buying Mustang Steve or not. This car was a great deal because it was missing all the front sheet metal. There was water in the motor, water in the transmission, and had been out in the field for a few years. The guy I bought it from had actually taken care of it, had the motor rebuilt with a mild cam, and had kept it inside for most of its life. And he was going through a divorce, and so it had been parked out in the field for a few years. And he told me that the front fenders were rusted, so he threw them away. But I'm pretty sure he wrecked it, and that's why all the front sheet metal was gone. It had a fiberglass cowl hood on it originally. That's kind of what came with it. And it's gone through many iterations in the time that I've owned it. The goal was to have a vehicle that I could drive hard and put away wet. I actually do park this outside. Eventually we'll get it nice enough. We'll park it inside once we get it painted and fix it up a bit. But underneath it's fairly solid. There's only a small hole in the floor pan. Otherwise it's fairly solid. It does have a little bit of leak around the windowsill, so I need to attend to that eventually, sooner rather than later. So the goal with this project was to build something that I could drive around while I'm working on it, rather than blow it apart and then restore every last detail, and then 10 years later I have my car. I wanted something I could drive pretty quick, and so that's what I did. Ended up draining all the water out of the motor, dropped the pan, pull the sludge out, and ended up using soaking Marvel Mystery Oil in the cylinders to free them up a bit. And ended up putting a new carburetor on it, and ended up having to work through most of the systems. At the end of the day, you kind of have to go through everything. If your car's been sitting for a period of time, you gotta fix everything. Anyway, it has left me stranded initially quite a bit. Initially, it started out, I had the factory radiator in it, and so it overheated a couple times, but it at least got hot, and then I would shut it off and have my wife come and tow me home with the tow rope. In the neighborhood is usually where this happened. And then I started getting a little bit more adventurous, and then I ended up having to use a tow truck to get it back one time because I was far enough away from home. The tow rope wasn't going to work. But then I put in an aluminum radiator with electric fans and solved the coolant issue once and for all. And so that worked there. On the transmission, I dropped the pan, replaced the filter, put new fluid in it. It continued to almost boil out. So I'd drive it, park somewhere, and then it would just puke transmission fluid everywhere. And so I'd carry some with me. I'd fill it back up and drive it again. And I did multiple fluid changes and just could not get all the water out. So eventually, actually, Michael recommended that I pull the drain on the torque converter, which I did, and I actually drained most of the torque converter fluid out and then refilled it. And it's maybe not the ideal way to do it, but it eventually did work, and I was able to get rid of all the water. And now the transmission's it shifts well, and it runs reliably. The other thing I did on the engine was, besides replace the carburetor, basically replace the entire ignition system. I tried to make the factory distributor work and coil and all of that, but it all was ready to be replaced. The tolerances were too loose in the distributor, so it was inconsistent. And so replaced all of the electricals around the ignition system. I've also rebuilt all the suspension. So in the rear, I did 1-inch leaf springs, 1-inch drop springs up front with the Shelby drop as well. New coils up front, new shocks. This car also came with four-wheel manual drum brakes from the factory, and I got those functioning. I actually had the drums turned, replaced the cylinders, kind of did everything to get it working well. And even with that, it still was somewhat inconsistent. It would pull sometimes, and just was not the performance I was looking for. With that said, the drum brakes actually prevented me from hitting a Challenger. I was in a roundabout one day, going a reasonable speed, and a Dodge Challenger pulled out in front of me, and I slammed on the brakes with the manual drum brakes, and it locked up the tires, and it stopped me actually decently quick. So the drum brakes, there's a lot of debate online about drum brakes versus disc brakes. The drum brakes, they technically do work. But I wanted to upgrade to a little more stopping power and also a little more modulation with the pedal. And so I put the Cobra kit on the front. So I've got the 13-inch Cobra brakes, and I love them. They're so great and smooth, and just very little force required. And then in the rear, I put the GT 2015 kit. So I've got, they're basically 13-inch brakes in the rear. So it's kind of square brakes, 13s all around. And I also have I upgraded the power brakes with a booster. It's not one of the Mustang Steve boosters, and so I'm going to end up replacing it with the Mustang Steve power brake kit soon. But for now, it stops great. Also with the setup that I've got with the carburetor, it's a Summit 650. It fires right up. So when it's cold, I give it 2 pumps. Fires right up. When it's hot, just turn the key and it fires right up. Not even a full revolution, barely. So it's fairly reliable at this point. The worst things that have happened to me is running out of gas. That's happened 3 times. Because I put in, it actually didn't have a gas tank in it when I bought it. So I bought the larger, later model Mustang tank that drops right in and has a little extra capacity. But I didn't hook up the fuel gauge, and so I ran out of fuel. It is hooked up now. And then the only other time I've broken down was after we had the 20th annual Mustang Steve Bash in 2023. Drove all the way down to Canyon Lake and back. So for here, that's about a 500-mile round trip. No issues at all. Basically didn't break down. I was able to cruise the freeway. The speedometer was fluctuated a little bit, so I'm not exactly sure how fast I was going. But keeping up with traffic, no issues. And then literally like the Monday after I got back, I was just, 15, 30 miles away from the house, and it breaks down. And it's actually the fuel pump. I bought the low-cost fuel pump from the local parts store. And anyway, ended up giving up the ghost and had to change it on the side of a divided 4-lane highway, so that was fun. And actually the fuel pump's gone out twice. The other time it went out, I was close enough to home that I got fuel and was able to fill the bowl in the carburetor and drove home just on the fuel in the carburetor bowl, and then replaced it at home. So I do need to upgrade to a better fuel pump. I did have an electric in there for a while, but it had too much pressure. So anyway, I've done a lot of iterations on this car already. And that's kind of the goal, is something that I can try out different products and setups and just to make it the best form, with the goal of eventually it being well tuned and something that I would keep inside and eventually paint. It was actually a Highland Green car from the factory with a gold nugget interior. They'd already painted most of it gold whenever I bought it, as you can see from the photos. The green paint is showing through in several places, and I really like the green. I also really like the gold. So I'm kind of torn on what color to paint it. Also considering eruption green, which is a newer Ford color that's a green metallic. On the interior, it's pretty much all converted to black. The carpet was faded. I spray dyed it black, and then got some seats with headrest, got it all recovered, and still working through that to make it nicer. I'll put in a headliner eventually. The window seals are leaking, so I got to do that. There's a very small hole in the floorboard. Otherwise, it's pretty solid underneath. So few projects left to do. Actually, a lot of projects left to do, but really the goal with this car was, let's get it on the road, let's drive it hard, and enjoy it, rather than blowing it apart and waiting 10 years to be able to enjoy it. And so that's what it's been. So it's definitely not perfect, but it's fun, and it's a Mustang, and it's opportunity to develop new kits on, and then also try out existing kits on it. Another issue I've got is the driver's door. When you open the door up, it literally like drops down an inch, and that's because the hinge is worn out up front. So I'll be installing a lifetime hinge kit from Mustang Steve. Another thing I'd like to do eventually is install a T5 or T56 transmission, and I'll be using the Mustang Steve cable clutch kit for that. That's probably a little further down the road because the C4, it's working good now. Anyway, so this is the car that was in the rear brake video, and you'll see this car in other future videos coming up. So if there's some mod you want to see or something you think I should do to it, what should I do next, let me know down in the comments. Also, if you've got an opinion on what color I should paint it, let me know, or leave it as is. Post it down in the comments, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.